Week 3 will cover financial flashpoints and multicultural issues. Financial flashpoints are profound money memories that lead to money scripts. Money scripts are typically unconscious transgenerational beliefs about money that are developed in childhood and drive adult financial behaviors, which can lead to money disorders. And money disorders are things such as hoarding, compulsive spending, or workaholism. Let's go into each of these more. Financial flashpoints, as I said, are early life events or a series of events associated with money that are so emotionally powerful that they leave an imprint that lasts into adulthood. So if you think about this, think about like your earliest memories around money. Were they positive or were they negative? I think that kind of changes how we see money for the rest of our life. Sometimes these can be really traumatic events around money. So many young people are growing up with the recession can be impacted by it. My grandmother grew up during the Depression, and she had some crazy hoarding behaviors because of that. And those are large traumas, but there's also small t traumas that can impact or create financial flashpoints, like seeing your parents fight about money, or having your credit card be declined at an embarrassing time. If there's enough small t traumas, then often our identity around money can be formed. Those money scripts that we'll talk about in a little bit. Klotz and Klotz believe that underlying cause of disordered money is often a history of trauma. And they might be right, because studies have found that most people with a gambling disorder report a history of sexual or physical trauma, and compulsive hoarders especially have experienced trauma, and based on that trauma, it has a direct relationship to the level of hoarding experience. And that's because trauma can have a real impact on our brain and our bodies. Our brain has two strong components to processing events and memories: a frontal lobe, which, by the way, is not fully formed until way into our 20s, which may explain some inappropriate high school and college mistakes, and our limbic system. Our limbic system is the oldest part of our brain, evolutionarily speaking. It's the feeling in our part of our brain that reacts with responses, instinctual responses like fight, flight, and freeze. Normally, memories will move from the limbic system to throughout our brain and neural connections, but with trauma, they can get stuck in the brain and prevent us from able to process it with higher level thinking. So whenever something in our life touches on that trauma, we'll have that same survival instinct reaction. So if you have these traumas around money, and then comes up to experience a time in your life today where you have to spend money or use money or think about money, you might fight, flight, or freeze. There are three main responses to trauma that I kind of talked about in the previous slide, which is fight, flight, freeze. I think fight and flight are kind of obvious and things that we probably learned about in a different class in biology or psychology 101 or whatever. But freeze is a little bit more confusing because it doesn't seem that beneficial as a reaction to survival, but it actually is. Most predators don't kill or eat a mobile animal. They're harder to see if you're not moving. The collapse can distract the predator, allowing other people to escape. And it's also a mechanism to minimize the pain before death by dissociating. So these three responses are often seen in any kind of trauma. And in fact, they often relate to symptoms of unresolved trauma that are seen in clients that have experienced any kind of trauma, not just financial trauma. By the way, I kind of hinted at what big T financial traumas are. Here's a better list of things that you could commonly see in clients that will impact their financial wellness because of the trauma related to poverty, depression, recession, more likely in our cases, bankruptcy, divorce, foreclosure, and so on. The survival to financial trauma often look very similar to the responses to any kind of trauma. The fight and flight is there, but I've actually seen the freeze response more than anything in my clients. I had so many clients who refused to do their taxes because they were afraid they owed money because they had no idea what they had in their bank accounts, no idea what they spent or made or anything. And I would always say to them, if anything, the government probably owes you money. If you owed them money in taxes, you would not have made it years without filing your taxes. But freezing, just avoiding, is just a very common reaction to financial trauma. Um, I thought this article by Clancy Britt was so interesting because oftentimes I always think of my client's trauma, but it's also so important to think about what we're coming into the room with. I thought it was so interesting reading that 93% of the financial planners had experienced post-traumatic stress. Uh, it is difficult to even achieve the diagnosis of post-traumatic stress because there's a lot of criteria. So I just want to make it clear that there was a real fundamental, big T, psychological trauma that happened to these financial planners during the recession, the economic crisis, or whatever you want to call. So now we're going to move away from the financial flashpoints and move into cultural competence, or thinking about how our gender, our culture, our religions, and everything else will impact our practice and our clients' experience around money. There are several important goals to think about in terms of creating your cultural competence. First, you need to be aware of what you're bringing into the situation. How does your culture, your gender, your religion, and so on impact your relationship with money, how you think about money? Is it a good thing in terms of money, or is it cause challenges? Goal two is to increase our effectiveness in working with others. And that is true for both people who are similar to us and different from us. I think when we work with clients that are actually too similar to us, we make assumptions without asking the right questions. And obviously, when we're working with people who are different than us, we have to be respectful of how they're different from us and also find out how they are different from us. Goal three is always to conduct better research because in better research, we get better practice. And then finally, let's talk about the disease concept of racism and sexism. Everyone is infested to some level to this disease. We all have stereotypes about genders, about races, about ethnicities that are so dangerous when we deny them or we are unaware of the stereotypes. Get aware of your baggage, figure it out. One of your readings for this week were the 7 steps for culturally responsive financial therapists. I thought it was so interesting how whitewashed this field is, with 80% of financial planners and 80% of the users of financial planning being white. When you think about that, in just a few years, whites will be probably the minority in the U.S., depending on how the wall goes or whatever. But in terms of like, how do we know that these values that have to be in how we work with clients, that assertiveness, independence, and yada yada yada, because it's such a white field, are going to work with other diverse groups. That's why let's go into these 7 steps a little bit more. Understanding your culture, understanding your biases that might develop, recognizing privilege is so important. And I want to be clear that recognizing that you have privileges does not mean that you don't experience difficulties. I think that's something that comes up. Oh, if I'm a white male and I'm a college student and make no money and I'm poor and everybody thinks I'm so privileged when I feel so unprivileged. I think it's different. I think you have to understand where you are at. It is advantageous of that you are a certain gender, that you are a certain race, yada yada. And then learn about your clients' cultures around money. Like, ask questions, take a not knowing stance to kind of get to know them better so that you're not making assumptions that are. Number four, demonstrate respect for cultural related strengths. If you have a client that is tithing 10% of their income but bouncing checks left and right because they can't afford it, you have to respect that that is their goal and that's what they want to work towards, and you have to build a financial plan around that goal. Distinguish between internal and external parts of a problem, validating the oppressive experiences, and don't challenge core cultural beliefs. If they want to tithe, or if they want to send money home to families in a different country, or if they want to have their parents move in, don't feel like you need to change that. You have to change the plan to meet their goals. Let's talk about gender socialization and money. I was not surprised by the findings of this article. I don't know if you guys were. I'm looking forward to talking about it. But it really made me think about my children. I have two girls and how I want them to relate to money and how I want to talk to them about money. I love my favorite part about financial therapy, and one of the things I wrote about in an article that I published in the journal, is that every time I dive deeper and deeper into financial therapy, it does not only help me as a practitioner, but it helps me in my own life too. In summary, today we talked about a lot of different things, but these financial flashpoints, we have them. They are moments in time that impact how we relate to money. They are going to be present in your clients too, and understanding their financial flashpoints will help you understand their trauma and their relationship to, or their reaction to money, I should say. Their entrenched beliefs and behaviors that can be changed if they need to be. But we also need to remember our culture and gender impacts our flashpoints and money scripts, and those might not need to be changed, but rather used to help clients plan and use their money to the way that best suits them, even if we disagree with them.